Okay, world history is, if you watch the introduction video, we know we're going to be dealing with the country of China. And the topic that I kind of came up with on my own called the failed Asian Spring. So, again, it kind of deals with communism kind of crumbling. The Cold War comes to an end. Um, the West defeats the East. And one particular place where the ending is not the same as the Soviet Union or countries in Eastern Europe is China. So once again, if in your introduction, what I talked about is I'm going to go through this presentation and go ahead and write this stuff out, pen in hand, on a piece of scrap paper or good paper, whatever you have. And then when the presentation is done, just kind of take your notes, then create a typed version in a brand new living document, and then kind of add your own pictures, maps, and graphs to the presentation. Okay, so here we go. Analyze the major political, economic, and cultural transformations in East Asia. Yeah, Red China. All right. Now, as we talked about earlier, we're going to be kind of dealing with China at the end of World War II. We all know during World War II, China was invaded by Japan, and for the most part, the Japanese occupied major parts of China, and so. At the end of World War II, this is China, I guess you could say, referring to communism, kind of like, siding with what the Soviet Union kind of had in place. And so the first word is communism. And, basically, we need to define what communism is. We kind of talked about it before in the Cold War, but I'm not really sure if we had the definition clearly defined. But basically, communism, the ultimate goal of communism is that there is a classless state. And what we've always known, that we talked about class, we talk about upper class, we talk about lower class, we talk about a middle class. And in communism, if it works and everything goes right, basically it is a classless society where there is no upper class, there is no lower class. Everyone is just kind of like glumped the same. So you don't kind of have, what you see here in the United States. We have billionaires, we have millionaires, we have people making $100,000 a year, people making $40,000 a year. We have people, that are living in the poverty level. So you have all these different classes, in a free market economy. But in this planned economy of communism, basically everything is kind of glumped to the same. For communism to work, there's just total control in the government. The government controls everything. The government controls prices. They control what products are made. They kind of control the farms on what the farmer grows, and what they're going to get for their efforts of being paid for their fruits of labor. Unlike today, our farmers today can take their stuff to market, and they can sell their stuff, along the side of the road, and so communism is basically, the government controls everything. Okay. Current communist countries today. So if you can think back to the Iron Curtain speech with Winston Churchill, you kind of saw a divided Europe, half red, half blue. You had communism that was taking place in parts of Asia, Latin America. And so maybe at one point, we'll just keep it simple math today, 50-50, that the world was like half democracy, half communism. So communism, of course, comes to, basically fails in 1989, but there are still some communist nations today. So write these communist nations down. So China today still kind of adapts some communist principles. Now, what China has done, and we're going to learn about here in our video presentation, is China has adapted to more of a free market economy, but they still, maintain a hard government rule, very little choice when it comes to elections. Basically, China with communism, it's a one-party rule, so you don't have choices like we have here in the United States, maybe between Republican parties, Democrats, Libertarian, the Green Party. So these are some of the current communist countries today. You have China, obviously we know that one. Anyone know this one? Anyone? Bueller Fry? Yeah, you guys got it. That one is Vietnam. So Vietnam is another communist country, but again, they kind of adapted to a free market economy, but again, government control with censorship and kind of limiting free speech. Okay, North Korea, I guess you could call that a communist country. This is probably the one country in the world today that is still just ruled with an iron fist, very dark. You don't know really what's going on in there. kind of known as a hermit kingdom. So we're going to kind of throw them in there as a current communist country. Cuba, 90 miles, south of Florida. So again, the communist threat, eventually kind of makes it to the brink of the United States. So Cuba today is still a communist country. I got it on there twice just to make sure you have it. Okay. Laos and also Cambodia, which also border Vietnam. And again, so that would have been a really good map quiz if we were in school, but we have to get those map quizzes rolling again next year. So those are some of the current communist countries, okay? Well, if we were in class today, we would be doing our reading today from the World History book. Yeah, the World History book. So I'd probably have you go to the Think, Pair, Share table, grab a World History book, getting groups of 2, getting groups of 3, and going to do some reading on 575 to 578. Obviously, we can't grab a world history book today, so Mr. Flynn's going to be teaching it. And so basically what happens is at the end of World War II, China is kind of in disarray. And what happens is that there is a fight for power. And I'm going to kind of make it really simple here. It kind of deals with 2 particular people. The first one here, his name is Chiang Kai-shek. Yeah, Chiang Kai-shek. So him and his followers, they're trying to, kind of piece together China and hopefully maybe someday rule China. And then opposing Chiang Kai-shek is Chairman Mao. Yeah, Mao Zedong. And now Mao Zedong, he's the communist. He's the one that, wants that classless society. So what you have here at the end of World War II, China is basically kind of in a civil war, fighting between the followers of Chiang Kai-shek and then the followers of Chairman Mao and Mao Zedong. Okay. So that would have been another section in our book we would have read, kind of dealing with China, communist, and Mao. So to make a long story short, Mao and the communists will eventually rule China. So when it's all said and done, we're not going to get into a whole lot of, the conflicts between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. We're just going to kind of get to the big idea that Mao and the communists basically come out victorious, and they kind of rule China by 1949. As Mao takes over China, obviously he's going to implement his rules. He's going to implement his policies. One is that he is going to allow women to take a more active part in the government. And so, so we kind of see the beginning here of women kind of getting more rights in China. At the end of the day, though, everyone's efforts is about basically doing good for society. I mean, that you are important as a person. How you live your life is important, but at the end of the day, it's about the success of society, the success of your country. So that kind of becomes Mao's, couple parts of his philosophy here with communism, kind of giving women more rights, opportunity to take part in the government. But again, it's going to be a communist government, and that the society comes first. Okay. As we stated earlier, ultimately the goal of communism is to have a classless society. Again, no upper class, no lower class, no middle class. Everyone's kind of lumped the same. So it'd be kind of like if we were back in school, like, traditional school with grades of like A, B, C, D, and E, we all know that, you could earn an A, but at the same time, we know you could earn like an F or an E. But if I ran my class like a communist, basically I would say is, hey, everybody in class, third hour, second hour, fifth hour, sixth hour, everyone's going to get a C. It doesn't matter, who you are or how smart you are or how hard you work, you're going to get a C. And at the same time, it's kind of like, well, if you do some work and turn some of it in, or maybe you don't turn some of it in, you'll still get a C. So that would be kind of like if I ran things in class. And of course, maybe some of you would like the idea of an automatic C, but I also think that the majority of you would be like, hey, if I do, A work or B work, whatever it is, that's what I should get. So that's kind of like the ultimate goal of communism, again, a classless society. Okay. What Chairman Mao does is he's going to give land to the peasants. So he basically takes from the rich and gives to the poor. And so if you were like a really large farm owner, land owner at the end of World War II, the government basically came in and took your land and kind of like, chopped it up into smaller parcels, and it was given to the peasants. the peasants to farm. So the peasants kind of got some land to farm, but again, the government's going to tell the peasants, what they can grow, what they can't grow, and how much money they're going to get for the crops that they produce. Again, under communism and Mao, industry, trade was under the control of the government. Again, the government in communism here, the government controls everything, okay? Obviously for communism to work, and you can kind of see that there's really no choice, no freedom, you're going to say, well, how can, someone survive? How can someone kind of stay in office? Well, obviously it kind of deals with intimidation, hard iron fist. If you speak out against the government or if you speak out against Chairman Mao, then obviously, you're going to have some people paying you a little visit, maybe getting arrested, going to a re-education camp, so Mao clearly will rule with an iron fist. And one of the things that he has, it was kind of known as the Little Red Book. And basically, this is the Bible of China. Today, maybe we could say that we are all kind of like living our lives through a certain book. Maybe it's the Bible, maybe it's a different book. But in China, it was a Little Red Book, and it was basically kind of like your guide to how to live your life, how you should think, what you should say, and what you should not say. So the Little Red Book was probably something that was handed out in schools at an early age, and you probably carried it with you from class to class, year to year. It was probably part of every big idea. Yeah, part of every big idea in China during the rule of Chairman Mao. Okay, and again, the Little Red Book kind of is just established real clear. What were the goals of communism? Okay, ultimately, if you're going to rule by intimidation, you got to have those jackbooted thugs. I think we called them jackbooted thugs in class. That kind of enforce that Little Red Book, and they were kind of known as the Red Guard. Yeah, the Red Guard. So they were the ones that if you were stepping out of line, the Red Guard would come pay you a visit. Okay, so that's Chairman Mao and his intimidation. All right, I think I've already covered that. I have to delete that slide. Sorry about that. At the same time, Chairman Mao really wanted to get rid of things from the West. Again, we've kind of seen this throughout world history, is that many times, the West has come in and, kind of imposed their way of living, their life, their culture, their religion, temples, books. And so Chairman Mao wants to get rid of anything Western, anything from the West. And so temples are destroyed, books from the West are burned, and, a lot of things that were foreign, were basically banned and not allowed into China. Okay. And again, people were arrested, sent to re-education camps, if they weren't buying in to what Chairman Mao kind of wants. Okay. Well, as we've said before, you can be a king, a queen, or a street sweeper, but someday we all face the Grim Reaper. And in 1976, Chairman passes away and he ascends. Yeah, he ascends to the heavens. So when Chairman Mao dies, the next leader is this guy right here. Yeah, this little ball of energy named Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, Deng Xiaoping. And so he comes in and he replaces Chairman Mao. Again, no free elections. He's just basically kind of handpicked, by the Communist government of China. Okay. And this is where I'm going to give Deng a little bit of credit. And he realizes now by 1976 that China is kind of like falling behind the West. It's falling behind other countries in the world and just being modernized. And so he comes in and kind of says, hey, how we're doing things isn't working. We're dry. We're stagnant. And, part of it is because you don't have that incentive, to work hard. As I said, if I ran communism in my classroom and everybody got a C, some of you would not do any work at all. And some of you would say, well, Mr. Flynn's giving us all these dang, living documents to do. And he wants these pictures, maps, and graphs to it, but why should I, bust my butt and put together a great living document and still get a C at the end? And therefore, things just kind of become dry. They become stagnant. We don't go anywhere. We don't improve. And so Deng comes in and he realizes that we need to modernize our industry. What China was producing was big, old, bulky, and it just wasn't that efficient. It just wasn't that good. And so he comes in and says, hey, our factories, man, we've got to modernize those and we got to start making new modern appliances. At the same time, this deals with the military and the weapons that China needs to kind of like rearm itself. So Deng comes in, and again, he kind of realizes, how we've got to run the show or run the business isn't working, and we need to change our industry. He allows farmers more choice in what they grow. He allows them to like sell their surplus food and kind of keep that money to themselves. So now the farmer can go out and work harder, and still turn his crops into the government, because at the end of the day, it's about feeding over 1 billion people, and but the farmer now could kind of keep the surplus and sell that, kind of like we see sometimes here in Michigan with like the sweet corn, or if you kind of head down towards like Van Buren County, you see like blueberries and strawberries. Farmers market might be another good example of the farmers kind of selling their surplus. So giving Deng some credit here, he comes in and says, hey, we got to modernize China because we're falling behind everyone else. Also emphasizes the technology aspect of modernizing China. And of course, today, man, when you think about technology and where it's made, I think it's, a lot of the stuff that we get today, technology wise, made in China. So industry, farming, and technology. Okay. Deng also says, hey, we need to modernize our army. They always had, the boots on the ground. It wasn't like they didn't have the troops. It was, again, not having the modern weapons, the modern aircraft. Today, China is a superpower with its Navy. And so a lot of that may come from the rule of Deng Xiaoping and kind of modernizing its military. Okay. We also see under Deng's rule, this is the beginning of the United States really doing a lot of business in China. Up until Deng Xiaoping, a lot of our businesses here in the United States were in the United States. Now, obviously, we had businesses that would go to Mexico and other countries around the world, but Deng Xiaoping just basically kind of opens up China to the United States and says, hey, General Motors, hey, Ford, hey, any other company, come to China. And, China basically can provide relatively easy a workforce. Again, you got 1 billion people, 1.2, 1.3 billion people in China. And so the workforce was there. A lot of American companies went to China because, they could pay the Chinese workers a lot less. They didn't have to worry about like medical and dental benefits, pension funds, paid vacation. China was a lot lax on like pollution laws, and so lot less red tape. So this was kind of the beginning, of American companies and American businesses heading to China to set up their shops there. And of course, the products that we get today that say made in China, obviously are made in China, then they come back to the United States. It gets sold in places like Walmart or wherever. And so under Deng is, the foreign investment is welcome into China. So he kind of brings back the West. I guess you could say he kind of brings back the West. We also get under Deng Xiaoping, we get students could now study abroad. I think we're all familiar with like foreign exchange students. And so we've always kind of had those, but in China under Deng Xiaoping, it's like now he's going to allow his citizens, his people to go to leave China, go to places in the West, study, learn. But the key thing was you were going to return back to China. Hopefully that you got new stuff, new material, and then share that out with the Chinese. And I don't want to say, like steal ideas from the West, but, if something is really good someplace else, it might be a good idea to try to maybe, kind of use that for yourself. So students could study abroad. And again, I mentioned this one earlier, peasants could now sell, the farmers could now sell their surplus for profit and kind of keep that, to themselves. Kind of like we see today, again, like in our farmers market here in Michigan. Okay. Well, Deng Xiaoping, his modernization worked. The per capita doubled in China. And basically what I mean by the per capita is that people's income doubled. So if you kind of take maybe, your parents' income, and within 5-10 years, that income doubles. That's a good thing. If you had a part-time job and, you're working somewhere and you make $200-$300 a week, and then in a short while you double that, that's kind of a good thing too. So economically, Deng Xiaoping's ideas of modernization, inviting the West back in, work, and so that's a good thing. At the same time, he's still going to rule with an iron fist. He's going to oppose free speech. He's going to oppose democracy. He's not going to open up free elections, and so that's going to be leading into our next video that you'll watch at some point, kind of dealing with the Tiananmen Square protest. So that's kind of roughly China. I know I covered a lot, but it's basically from like the end of World War II in the 40s to about 1989, with Chairman Mao, who still kind of really, I guess you could say maybe more like the George Washington, of China. And that if you're in China today, there's pictures, portraits of Chairman Mao, statues of him everywhere. And so from Chairman Mao to Deng Xiaoping and his modernization, but still opposing democracy. Okay, so that's our first video that's coming to an end. Notes and type that up and throw that into your living document, and then we'll do our next video, or I'll do the next video here in a few minutes, but obviously you guys can watch that at any time.